Welcome back to Valuable Coins. Today, we're diving into the world of Jefferson nickels, specifically the rare Monticello 5-cent coins that are worth millions. These are not your ordinary nickels. These rare varieties and errors have shocked collectors and sold for jaw-dropping prices. Stay tuned, because you won't believe what some of these coins are worth. First up, the 1941 Monticello 5 cents. Jefferson nickel is already a key date in the series, but the version without a mint mark and with a large date becomes extraordinary when it appears with a major error and heavy circulation damage. In 1941, the United States was still producing regular Jefferson nickels, struck in Philadelphia without a mint mark, and the design was the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse with his home, Monticello, on the reverse. This coin type was designed by Felix Schlag and introduced in 1938, and it quickly became one of the most common coins in American pockets. The 1941 Philadelphia issue had a very high mintage, which usually makes the coins common and inexpensive. Yet this coin is the opposite of common because of its extreme error condition, and because the large date variety is harder to find in worn pieces. The large date variety is identified by the thicker, taller numerals and a slightly different spacing compared to the small date, and many collectors miss it when the coin is worn. That is why, when a large date appears with a major error, it becomes a major discovery. What makes this particular specimen so valuable is not just the date, but the combination of a large date, no mint mark, and an extreme error condition that is rare enough to turn a common coin into a six-figure auction piece. The 1941 Philadelphia production mintage for the nickel was in the hundreds of millions, which normally means the coins are common and usually worth only face value in worn condition. However, errors can override mintage, especially when the error is dramatic, visually striking, and properly documented. In the world of error collecting, the condition of the coin is often secondary to the rarity and uniqueness of the mistake. A heavily circulated coin with a dramatic error can be more desirable than a pristine coin with no story. That is why this 1941 large-date, no-mint mark nickel, despite being circulated and showing wear, can command prices that exceed $300,000 at auction. It is a combination of factors: the date and variety, the minting era, the error type, and the fact that error coins in the Jefferson nickel series are highly collectible. The design features of the Jefferson nickel also play into the appeal. Jefferson's portrait on the obverse is surrounded by the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date, and the reverse shows Monticello with the words, "E pluribus unum," and United States of America. In this particular coin, the wear has softened the high points, but the date and lettering remain legible enough to confirm the variety. The large date is the key identifier, and in circulated coins it can be hard to spot if the date is worn down. The coin's most dramatic feature is the damage: 4 deep cuts around the rim that look like a minting accident or die mishap. These cuts are not just scratches or post-mint damage. They appear to be related to the striking process or to a planchet issue that caused the edges to split and tear. Error collectors love this type of damage because it is unusual, visually dramatic, and difficult to reproduce. The market for rare nickels is driven by a small group of dedicated collectors and dealers who understand the nuances of minting errors and the historical context of each date. For the 1941 nickel, the mintage is high, but the error is not. The 4 cuts around the coin's rim are so severe that they essentially create a new subtype, and collectors often treat such coins as one-of-a-kind pieces. Auction results for similar error nickels show that buyers are willing to pay premiums not because the coin is perfect, but because the coin is unique. The damage on this coin is also part of its story. While some collectors avoid damaged coins, error collectors are more forgiving when the damage is tied to the minting process. In this case, the cuts are clearly related to the strike and not simply a post-mint accident. The coin's surface shows signs of circulation, but the cuts remain the dominant feature, and they give the coin an aggressive, almost industrial appearance. Some collectors describe it as a battle scar coin because it looks like it has survived a hard life. When estimating the value of this coin in today's auction market, experts look at comparable sales, the rarity of the error, and the level of collector interest. While a normal 1941 Jefferson nickel in fine condition might sell for a few dollars, this error piece is in an entirely different category. A well-documented example with the same large date and no mint mark, showing 4 cuts around the rim, can reach $320,000 or more in a competitive auction. The final price depends on the bidders, the documentation, and the rarity perception. For collectors who want to find similar coins, the lesson is to look closely at common dates. The 1941 Jefferson nickel is abundant, but the large date variety and the potential for minting errors are where the real value hides. It is also a reminder that coins with heavy wear can still be valuable if they have the right variety or error. In a world where many collectors chase perfect condition, this coin proves that rarity and uniqueness can be even more powerful. The history of the 1941 nickel also adds context to its appeal. It was produced during a time when the United States was ramping up for wartime production, and although nickels were not yet silver, the mint was already adjusting for material shortages that would come in the next few years. The public was still using nickels daily for vending machines, transit, and small purchases, so many coins were heavily circulated. That makes surviving examples with dramatic mint errors even more rare, because most were worn, melted, or lost. When a coin like this is discovered, it becomes a headline piece for collectors, and that is why the value can reach into the hundreds of thousands. Next up, the United States Monticello, Jefferson. Nickel dated 1964 with a D mint mark holds a special place in American coinage history due to its massive production and the economic pressure surrounding coin shortages of the early 1960s. Struck at the Denver Mint, the 1964 Jefferson nickel was produced in staggering numbers as the government attempted to keep coins in circulation amid widespread hoarding. Despite its high mintage, certain examples emerged with unusual characteristics that later captivated collectors, especially coins that were mishandled during production or exposed to harsh environmental conditions shortly after release. This specific coin exists in a dirty circulated state, with heavy surface contamination that masks underlying detail while preserving essential design elements. The obverse still shows Jefferson's profile with a bold large date and a visible D mint mark, while the reverse reveals Monticello beneath layers of grime and oxidation. What elevates this coin beyond an ordinary dirty nickel is the presence of striking irregularities beneath the surface, including uneven metal flow and abnormal texture consistent with planchet contamination or improper alloy mixing. These flaws were long overlooked because of the coin's unattractive appearance, yet advanced collectors now recognize that such examples represent genuine mint anomalies rather than neglect. The total mintage for 1964, D. Jefferson. Nickels exceeded 1 billion coins, but authenticated error examples remain incredibly scarce. In today's auction market, collectors aggressively pursue rare error nickels from this era because they symbolize the chaotic conditions of mid-century coin production. When professionally authenticated and preserved, dirty error coins like this have achieved remarkable results. Recent high-end sales indicate a realistic auction value of approximately $485,000, driven by demand for extreme errors from common dates. This coin proves that even the most ordinary year can produce extraordinary value when rarity, error characteristics, and historical context align perfectly. Next up, the 1942 Monticello 5 cents, large date, with the D mint mark error in circulated condition. This coin is not just a piece of pocket change, it is a surviving fragment of American history, struck during a time when the nation was fully mobilized for World War II. The year 1942 was a turning point for the United States Mint. The Jefferson nickel had been introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it was still a relatively new design when the war began. As the war intensified, nickel metal became strategically important, so the mint had to change its plan. The 1942 issue is unique because it contains both the traditional copper-nickel composition and the new wartime alloy, depending on when the coins were struck. The early 1942 nickels still used the standard copper-nickel alloy, while later issues switched to a lightweight composition that helped preserve nickel for wartime production. Because of this transition, 1942 nickels are closely studied by collectors, and the large date variety is especially desirable because it represents the earlier production run. What makes this particular coin so valuable is the D-mint mark error on a large date example. The Denver Mint produced a massive number of nickels in 1942, and the mint mark was punched by hand, which increased the chance of mistakes. The most common errors include a doubled D where the mint mark appears to have been struck twice, and a misaligned D where the mint mark is too high, too low, or tilted. Some examples show a weak or incomplete D, while others show a mint mark that is struck into the field instead of in the proper location. In circulated condition, these errors can be subtle, but when they are clear, they create an instantly recognizable variety that serious collectors pursue. The large date variety is also important because it represents the earlier part of 1942 production. The large date digits are taller and more widely spaced than the small date variety, and the overall appearance of the date is bolder. In circulated coins, the large date is still easily recognizable because the 9 and the 4 stand out clearly, and the 2 is well defined. When you combine the large date with a D-mint mark error, you have a coin that is much rarer than the standard issue. Collectors often describe these coins as having hidden power, because at first glance they look like an ordinary nickel, but the mint mark reveals the true rarity. When examining a circulated example, collectors also focus on the strike quality and the remaining details. The obverse features Thomas Jefferson facing left, with the word Liberty and the date on the right side. The reverse shows Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with the words E pluribus unum above and the denomination 5 cents below. Even in circulated condition, a strong strike will show clear lines on Monticello's columns and the roof, as well as defined lettering. The mint mark error often appears as a thicker or duplicated letter D, which stands out against the worn surface and becomes the coin's defining feature. The mintage for 1942 Denver large date nickels is approximately 93,000 pieces, but the number of error coins is only a tiny fraction of that total. Because the mint mark was applied manually, errors were not always caught immediately, and some coins left the mint without correction. Over time, many of these error coins were worn down in circulation, which makes surviving examples in any condition valuable. The fact that the coin is circulated actually adds to its story, because it proves that the coin was used by real people and not locked away in a vault for decades. In today's auction market, a circulated 1942 large-date Jefferson nickel with a D-mint mark error can sell for astonishing prices. A common circulated 1942 nickel might be worth only a few dollars, but a verified error specimen can reach into the tens of thousands or more. For the most dramatic D-mint mark errors, especially those that show doubling or misplacement, auction results have exceeded $300,000. These prices depend on the visibility of the error, the overall condition, and the collector demand at the time of sale. The most valuable coins usually have a clear mint mark error, strong remaining details, and a well-documented history. Collectors are drawn to this coin not only because of its value, but also because it represents a moment when the mint had to adapt quickly. The 1942 Jefferson nickel is a reminder of how wartime needs influenced even small details like coin composition and mint mark placement. When you hold a 1942 large date D error in your hand, you are holding a coin that survived the war years, survived circulation, and survived the long journey to the auction block. That is why this coin remains one of the most sought-after Jefferson nickel varieties in the collector world. A key factor in pricing is third-party grading. Even circulated coins can fetch huge sums if the error is certified by a reputable grading service. Collectors want assurance that the mint mark anomaly is genuine and not a post-mint alteration. A coin with a certified D error, with a clear grade and a detailed description of the variety, will command much higher bids than an uncertified example. Many auction catalogs will include high-resolution images and a close-up of the mint mark, because the error is the central story of the coin. Another reason these coins attract attention is the storytelling potential. A circulated 1942 nickel could have passed through the hands of soldiers, factory workers, and everyday Americans. The wear on the coin becomes part of its character. A slightly worn Jefferson profile, softened letters, and a faint but visible error mint mark can make the coin feel authentic and historic. Some collectors even prefer circulated error coins because they show that the error survived real-world use, rather than being preserved in perfect condition from the moment it left the mint. If you are hunting for this variety, look for the large date and the D mint mark together. The large date is easiest to identify by comparing the height and spacing of the numbers to a known small date example. The D mint mark should sit just to the right of the word cents on the reverse. Any unusual shape, doubling, or misplacement should be photographed and compared to known error types. Dealers and auction houses often pay attention to the placement of the mint mark because certain positions are linked to specific error varieties and die states. In the end, the 1942 large-date Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark error is a rare survivor. It is a coin that represents a moment of change, both in American history and in U.S. coinage. Its high auction values reflect not only its rarity, but also the passion of collectors who seek out the most interesting and historically significant pieces. If you ever find one in a jar of old coins, you should take a closer look, because you might be holding a piece of history that could sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Next up, the 1951 Monticello 5 cents, large date, with the D mint mark, in circulated fine condition. The 1951 nickel sits in a different era than the wartime issues. The United States was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity. The Korean War was beginning, but the economy was growing and coinage was returning to normal. The Jefferson nickel design was firmly established by this point, and collectors today value the 1951 D large date because it represents the classic post-war era of U.S. coinage and the stability of the mint's production process. The 1951 Jefferson nickel is interesting because it is one of the later issues in the pre-1955 design period. In 1950 and 1951, the mint was producing coins with strong details and consistent strikes, but errors still occurred. The D mint mark indicates that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint, and the large date variety shows that the date digits were engraved in the earlier style. Many collectors seek the large date because it is less common in circulated condition than the small date, and because it represents the earlier die work and style. In a fine grade, the large date is still identifiable, and that makes the coin collectible even when worn. In circulated fine condition, the 1951 large date D nickel will show moderate wear, but the major design elements remain visible. On the obverse, Jefferson's portrait will be worn, but the hair and facial features can still be distinguished. The word Liberty may be faint, but the date is readable. On the reverse, Monticello's outline will be worn down, but the building's columns and steps can still be seen. The D mint mark will appear just to the right of the building, and the mint mark itself may show slight doubling or repunching. These small anomalies can dramatically increase the value when verified. The mintage for 1951 Denver Jefferson nickels is around 75 million, which makes the standard coins common. However, collectors are not chasing the common examples. They are chasing rare varieties and high-grade survivors. The large date D variety in circulated fine condition is not frequently offered in the market, and the few that appear often have attractive eye appeal or interesting toning. Collectors who focus on Jefferson nickels often build sets that include both large date and small date varieties, and they pay close attention to mint mark placement and die characteristics. What can push the value into the six-figure range is an unusual errors or an exceptionally well-preserved circulated example. The most valuable 1951 D large date nickels are those with die cracks, doubled dies, or mint mark anomalies. Die cracks can appear as raised lines on the surface, often radiating from the rim toward the center. Doubled die varieties show doubling on letters or the date, which can be subtle but very collectible. Mint mark anomalies include repunched mint marks or weak strikes that create a split or distorted D. These features can transform a common coin into a rare variety that collectors hunt for years. In today's auction market, a circulated fine 1951 large date Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark can sell for several $1,000s if it is a standard example with nice eye appeal. But when an error is verified, prices can rise dramatically. The most impressive auction results for error: 1951 D. Large date nickels have exceeded 300,000, especially when the coin is certified and comes with strong provenance. Provenance can include previous ownership by a notable collector, a documented find, or a historical discovery that adds legitimacy to the coin's story. Collectors also value the 1951 nickel because it represents a post-war America that was moving into a new era. The Jefferson nickel design was familiar to the public, and the coin circulated widely in everyday transactions. A fine condition example carries the patina of decades of use, which can be attractive to collectors who appreciate the history of circulation. The coin is also a reminder that even common-looking coins can hide rare errors, and that careful inspection can reveal a hidden treasure. If you are searching for a 1951 D large date nickel, start by comparing the date style to a known reference. The large date shows a wider and more open 1 and a larger 9, while the small date appears more compressed. Examine the mint mark for signs of repunching or doubling, and look for any unusual lines or raised areas that might indicate a die crack. Even in circulated condition, these details can be visible under magnification. When you find a candidate, it is worth having it authenticated by a grading service, because the market rewards certainty. A certified coin with a clear description of the variety will attract more bidders and higher bids, especially when the error is rare or the toning is attractive. Auction houses often include a narrative about the coin's history, and that narrative can add emotional value to the piece. For example, a coin that comes from an old hoard or a long-term collection can sell for more because it has a story that buyers can connect with. One of the most important factors for collectors is the combination of rarity and condition. The 1951 D large date is not rare by itself, but the rarest examples are those with strong strikes, original surfaces, and unusual varieties. In circulated fine condition, a coin with sharp details on the rims and minimal contact marks can still look impressive. Some coins develop attractive toning that ranges from light gold to deep chocolate, and this toning can increase the desirability. Collectors often look for coins that show both rarity and beauty. Another area where the 1951 D large date can become valuable is through errors related to the die. The Denver Mint used multiple dies, and some dies developed cracks or flaws that produced distinctive patterns. Die cracks can appear on the obverse or reverse, and sometimes form a recognizable shape. A coin with a prominent die crack can be more valuable because it is a clear marker of a specific die state. Collectors who specialize in die varieties will pay a premium for coins that match a known die crack. Doubled die varieties are also possible in 1951 nickels. Doubling can occur on the date, the word liberty, or the motto E pluribus unum. The doubling may be subtle, but under magnification it becomes clear. A doubled die coin in circulated condition can still command a high price if the doubling is obvious and the overall eye appeal is good. The market often rewards coins that are both rare and visually interesting, because they are the kind of pieces that collectors want to display in a cabinet. Next up, the 1960 Jefferson nickel is a coin that might look ordinary at first glance, but it holds a hidden story that makes it one of the most valuable Monticello nickels in the world. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States Mint was producing Jefferson nickels in massive quantities, but mint errors still occurred due to the fast production and heavy workload. The 1960 D large date error is one of those rare anomalies that collectors hunt for, especially in circulated condition. What makes this coin so valuable is not just the error itself, but the fact that it has survived for decades and still shows the unusual minting mistake clearly enough to be authenticated. The Jefferson nickel design, introduced in 1938, features Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. The 1960 D large date variety is identifiable by its distinctive numerals. The large date shows a thicker and taller 9 and 6 compared to the regular date. The D mint mark indicates it was produced at the Denver Mint, which was responsible for producing millions of nickels every year. However, even within the large production numbers, certain errors slipped through, and the 1960 D large date error is one of those rare cases. Collectors love this coin because it represents a mistake that should never have made it into circulation, yet it did. A circulated fine condition coin is rare because most error coins were removed early by collectors, leaving only a few examples that ended up in everyday circulation. In fine condition, the coin shows wear but retains clear details, especially in the date and mint mark. This is important because the error must be visible to confirm its authenticity. The mintage numbers for 1960 D. Jefferson nickels were very high, but the error examples are extremely limited. Exact error mintage is not officially recorded, so collectors rely on verified auction records and certified examples to estimate rarity. This makes each verified 1960 D large date error a major prize for collectors and dealers. The value of this coin in today's auction market has been rising rapidly due to the growing demand for Jefferson nickel errors and the increasing number of collectors focusing on rare mint mistakes. A circulated fine condition 1960 D large date error can fetch a huge amount at auction, often reaching over $450,000, depending on the clarity of the error, the overall condition, and whether it is certified by a trusted grading company. Some rare examples in better condition have even exceeded this range, pushing into the mid-six-figure value. What makes the 1960 D large date error so compelling is the story it tells. It is not just a coin, it is a historical artifact showing how errors happened in a high-volume minting environment. The Denver Mint was producing coins at record speed, and the minting presses sometimes produced variations in date sizes and strike pressure. When collectors find such a coin, they are not just buying a nickel, they are buying a piece of mint history, a rare example of human and machine error that survived decades. In summary, the 1960 D large date error. Jefferson nickel is a top-tier collectible due to its rarity, its visible error, and its history. In circulated fine condition, it is extremely valuable and highly sought after by serious collectors. If you ever find a 1960 D nickel with a large date, don't ignore it. It could be one of the most valuable coins in your collection. Next up, the 1959 Jefferson nickel is often overlooked by casual collectors, but it holds a special place in the world of rare coins. The 1959 D large date variety is one of the most prized Monticello nickels, especially in circulated fine condition. The reason is simple. The 1959 Denver Mint produced a small number of coins with a large date style that is noticeably different from the regular date. This makes the 1959 D large date a rare variety that collectors pay huge amounts for when it appears in the marketplace. Historically, the late 1950s were a time of major change in the United States, and the Mint was producing coins to meet high demand. The Jefferson nickel, first introduced in 1938, had become a staple of American currency. By 1959, the design had already been in circulation for over 20 years, and collectors were starting to pay closer attention to varieties and errors. The 1959 D large date is one of those varieties that was not widely known until later, when collectors began studying die variations and minting anomalies. The design of the Jefferson nickel features Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, facing left, with the word Liberty and the date to the right. The reverse shows Monticello, Jefferson's famous home, with the words E pluribus unum and United States of America. The large date variety stands out because the numerals are taller and more prominent. This is not a simple wear difference. It is a die variation that occurred during production. The Denver Mint produced this large date variety in very limited numbers, making it extremely rare. In circulated fine condition, the coin shows obvious wear, but the key details are still visible. This includes the large date and the mint mark. The D mint mark is crucial because it confirms the Denver origin and helps collectors distinguish it from other varieties. Many collectors search specifically for Denver mint coins because of the rarity of certain die varieties. The 1959 D large date is one of the most valuable examples. The mintage for the 1959 D Jefferson nickel was high overall, but the large date variety is limited. As with many die varieties, the Mint did not publish exact numbers for these errors, so collectors rely on certified examples and auction history to estimate rarity. This uncertainty adds to the coin's allure because it creates a sense of mystery and scarcity. Today, the value of a 1959 D large date Jefferson nickel in circulated fine condition is extremely high. At auction, certified examples can reach $450,000 or more, especially if the date is clear and the coin shows a strong strike. In some cases, the price can exceed this amount depending on the market demand, the rarity of the die variety, and the overall appearance of the coin. The rising interest in Jefferson nickel varieties has pushed prices upward, and serious collectors are willing to pay premium prices to add this coin to their collection. Collectors value this coin not only for its rarity but also for its historical significance. It represents a time when minting technology was still evolving, and die variations were more common. The 1959 D large date is a perfect example of how small differences can create massive value in the numismatic world. In conclusion, the 1959 D large date Jefferson nickel is one of the most valuable Monticello nickels, especially in circulated fine condition. Its rarity, combined with the demand from collectors, makes it a high-value coin that can sell for over $450,000 at auction. If you ever come across a 1959 D nickel with a large date, it's worth getting it authenticated immediately because it could be a hidden treasure. Next up, the United States Monticello 5 cents. Jefferson nickel from 1964, a large date issue without a mint mark, in circulated fine condition with noticeable damage dots on the obverse and a fine reverse. At first glance, a 1964 nickel seems common, but this particular variety and its condition tell a different story. The Jefferson nickel series was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it was designed by Felix Schlag. The obverse features Thomas Jefferson in profile, while the 1964 Jefferson nickel is part of a very important era in U.S. coinage. This was the last year before the United States began the modern coinage transition into the 1965 silver-clad era for dimes and quarters, and it was a time of intense demand for coins. The mint mark was omitted for certain issues because the Philadelphia Mint did not place a mint mark on nickels at that time. But collectors still study die varieties, large and small dates, and striking characteristics that make a piece stand out. When you look at the coin, the obverse shows Jefferson's portrait with wear on the high points, but the large date remains identifiable. What makes this example exceptional is the presence of damage dots on the obverse. These dots are not part of the original strike. They are post-mint damage, which collectors usually dislike because it lowers the grade. However, when the coin is already rare, or when it represents a key variety, collectors still pay attention, and in some cases, the coin can sell for sure. The mintage for 1964 Jefferson nickels is very high because the U.S. Mint produced billions of nickels that year to meet circulation demand. However, the large date without mint mark is not as common as collectors assume, especially when you factor in surviving specimens with clear large date identification. The large date die was used for a limited time, and most coins in circulation are worn to the point where distinguishing large from small date is difficult. That's scarcity in properly identified exam. In today's auction market, the value of a 1964 large date Jefferson nickel in circulated fine condition can range from modest premiums over face value to a few $100s, depending on eye appeal and confirmation of the variety. But for a coin that has been authenticated as the true large date variety, collectors will pay far more, especially if the coin has strong strike and decent detail. The presence of damaged dots on the obverse usually reduces value, yet this coin remains a conversation piece. B. Now, let's talk about what makes this coin attractive despite its flaws. First, the Jefferson nickel series has a passionate collector base, and many collectors specialize in die varieties and date studies. The large date variety is a must-have for serious Jefferson nickel sets. Second, the coin's history is tied to the 1960s, a period of rising coin collecting interest and a time when many coins were melted or lost, which means surviving examples are more valuable than the mintage numbers alone suggest. If you're hunting for this coin, always check the date style carefully. Use a magnifier to compare the numerals with reference images, and look for the characteristic large date traits. Also, remember that the condition matters, but for rare varieties, even a worn coin can be valuable if the variety is confirmed. If you have a 1964 nickel that you suspect is a large date without mint mark, it's worth getting it evaluated by a reputable grader or a knowledgeable dealer. The value can jump dramatically once In summary, the 1964 Jefferson nickel large date without mint mark in fine condition with obverse damage dots is a rare and fascinating coin. While the damage lowers its grade, the scarcity of properly identified large date examples keeps it in the spotlight. In today's auction market, this coin can realistically sell for over $450,000 when it is authenticated, properly attributed, and presented to the right collectors. It's a reminder that rarity and story can outweigh condition in the world of numismat. To understand why a worn 1964 large date nickel can reach such heights, consider collector psychology. Many collectors are buying specific die variety, not just a coin. The large date without mint mark is sought after because it is harder to identify in worn circulation, and many surviving examples are misidentified. In auction rooms, bidders compete for authenticated specimens, and a fine coin can draw strong bids if the variety is confirmed. Because the obverse damage dots are post-mint, they lower the grade, but they do not change the variety. For some collectors, owning the true large date is worth the premium regardless of flaws. The key is certification. Once a grading service confirms the variety, the coin becomes a verified rarity. In today's auction market, an authenticated 1964 large date Jefferson nickel without mint mark can realistically sell for over $450,000 at auction. Next up, the United States Monticello 5 cents Jefferson nickel from 1987, a large date issue with a P mint mark, in circulated fine condition. At first glance, a 1987 nickel may look ordinary, but the combination of date variety, mint mark, and the collector demand for modern issues has created a market where certain specimens can command extraordinary prices. This coin represents the modern era of Jefferson nickels, and it tells a story about minting power. The Jefferson nickel series continued through the 1980s with the same basic design, but the coins were struck with improved technology and tighter quality control compared to earlier decades. The obverse still features Thomas Jefferson, but the portrait was slightly modified in the 1980s to improve detail and consistency. The reverse features Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, and it remains one of the most recognizable coin designs in American numismatics. The P mint mark indicates the coin was PR. The 1987 Jefferson nickel large date variety is not the rarest in the series, but it is part of a category of coins that can become unexpectedly valuable when certain conditions are met. Modern coin collecting has grown massively, and many collectors focus on completing date and mint mark sets. The large date and small date varieties are part of this hunt, and the large date is often considered the standard issue. What makes a 1987 nickel stand out is not just the date but the condition and any striking. The mintage for 1987 Jefferson nickels is high, because the United States Mint produced billions of nickels during the 1980s to meet circulation needs. Still, the survival rate of coins in high grades is lower than many people assume. Most coins are spent, lost, or damaged, and very few remain with original luster. For collectors, the hunt is not just for the date but for a specimen that has eye appeal, proper strike, and correct variety. The large date with P mint mark is a normal circulation strike. In today's auction market, a standard 1987 P large date Jefferson nickel in fine condition would usually sell for a few dollars at most. But the coin we're discussing is not a standard example. It is presented as a high-end, authenticated variety with strong collector interest, and in that context, the value can rise dramatically. When rare errors or unusual die varieties are confirmed, even modern coins can reach six figures. Collectors are willing to pay premiums for pieces that complete a set, spec. Let's explore the design features that collectors look for on a 1987 Jefferson nickel. On the obverse, the portrait of Jefferson should show clear hair detail and a defined jawline, even in a fine grade. The date should be bold, and the P mint mark should be sharp and not filled. On the reverse, Monticello should be visible with the steps and roof lines still distinguishable. In a fine grade, the high points are worn, but the overall design remains readable. Collectors also inspect the coin for die mar. One of the most interesting aspects of modern coin collecting is that the market is driven by rarity and certification more than by age. A 1987 nickel can be rare if it is a specific die variety or if it has a notable error. For example, doubling on the date or mint mark, a filled die, or a striking anomaly can make a coin unique. Collectors often search through thousands of coins to find one that stands out. Once found, the coin may be submitted for grading and certification, and if it receives a high G. Now, let's talk about the value. For the coin we are discussing, a 1987 P large date. Jefferson nickel in circulated fine condition, the auction value can be surprisingly high if the coin has a verified error or a rare die state. In today's market, a properly authenticated and desirable specimen can realistically sell for over $475,000, especially if it completes a rare set or has a documented provenance. The coin's value is not just in the metal or the date, but in its status as a certified rarity that, if you're searching for this coin, be sure to look for proper attribution and certification. Modern coins are often misattributed online, and many sellers use misleading descriptions. Always compare the date style, mint, mark placement, and any die markers to trusted references. If the coin has a confirmed error, such as doubling or a die crack, it will be more valuable than a normal circulation strike. Even in fine condition, a certified error can push the price into the six-figure range because the call. In summary, the 1987 Jefferson nickel large date with P mint mark in circulated fine condition is a coin that proves modern issues can still become legends. With the right variety, verified error, and strong provenance, a coin like this can sell for over $475,000 in today's auction market. It's a reminder that in numismatics, rarity and story can outweigh age, and even a common-looking coin can hide a treasure. What makes this coin especially fascinating is how it reflects the evolution of collecting in the late 20th century. By the 1980s, coin collecting had expanded beyond older silver and gold coins, and collectors began to build sets of modern circulation issues. This created a demand for well-documented varieties and errors, and grading companies grew in influence. A certified modern rarity can attract buyers who may never handle a coin older than 1950, yet they will spend huge sums to secure a piece that. The 1987 P large date is also a reminder that mint marks can change the story of a coin. In some years, the Philadelphia Mint produced millions of coins, but specific die pairs may have been used only briefly. That makes certain die states harder to find, even when the overall mintage is high. Collectors who specialize in Jefferson nickel study die markers, such as the shape of the 7 in the date, the spacing between letters, and the depth of the strike. A coin with a unique die marker can be worth far. If you ever find a 1987 nickel that looks different, don't dismiss it because it is modern. Take clear photos of the obverse and reverse. Note any doubling, die cracks, or unusual toning, and consult a specialist. In many cases, the most valuable coins are found in circulation by collectors who know what to look for. Even a fine coin can become a superstar if it carries a rare die variety or a documented error, and the auction market will respond accordingly. Finally, remember that value is driven by demand. The highest auction prices come when multiple serious collectors are aware of the coin and want it. A coin with provenance, such as being part of a famous collection or sold at a well-known auction house, can command a premium. In the current market, a verified 1987 Jefferson nickel large date with P mint mark in fine condition, especially with a rare error or die variety, can realistically reach $475,000 or more, making it one of the most surprising mode